Hello, I'm here at the Crumbs Doilies HQ with my very good friend Sally Della, and Sally is head of the kitchen here, which means she is in charge of coordinating and designing all of our bespoke cakes, and that means she is an ace sugar paster, isn't that right? Yes,
yeah,
right.
Maybe.
So I thought it would be really fun if Sally shared some of her hints and tips with us to give you the scoop on how to get really, really professional finishes on your sugar pasted layer cakes. So where do we start?
Okay, so I'm going to start by filling and layering up our cake. I've got 4 layers here, and I've chosen to use a Madeira cake.
And is the choice of your cake important when you're sugar pasting?
Yeah, definitely. If you feel the weight of the sugar paste here, it's
really
pretty heavy. Yeah. So if you imagine just putting that on top of your cake, and you have a really soft cake, it's just going to completely collapse and crumble.
Okay.
So I've got a Madeira cake here. It's much denser, it's got a smaller crumb, there's less air in it, so it can take a lot more weight.
So like things like carrot cake, like a really squishy carrot cake, probably aren't the most suitable cake in the world for sugar pasting, just because they're too squishy.
They're too squishy. Delicious, but squishy.
Okay. Right, so Sally's just going to stick the first layer on and get that out of the way for you, and it's in the middle of her lovely board.
Yeah.
And what happens next? So with the weight of the sugar paste, is there anything we can do to prevent that?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So we've got the denser cake, and then what I'm going to do now, rather than just spread on my nice, lovely, soft, creamy buttercream, I've got some stiffer buttercream here.
And how do you make that?
I just put a little bit more icing sugar in it.
Right.
So it still tastes delicious, but this is going to act as a dam, like a wall. So I'm going to pipe this all around the edge of this cake here, and then I'll fill it with the nice soft stuff.
So as you can see, the buttercream that she's putting on is really soft, and that's not going to take any weight at all. So that dam that she put around the edge is really important to avoid all that smushing. You're going to put jam in it, I hope.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Cake's not a cake without jam.
It's not. And also, if you do want to put jam in between your layers, it's important to put the jam on the top of the buttercream rather than the bottom, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise you get a bit
kind
of
of smushed together.
Yeah, it smushes together.
Not that it tastes nice. So I'm actually just going to spread this on and not go right to the edges, so that it doesn't splurge out, like so.
Get that unwrapped for you.
Next piece. You'll find if you're using a Madeira, it's actually much easier to handle as well, because it's a little bit stiffer and firmer. Just line that up.
And Madeira is a bit like pound cake as well.
Yeah, I really love Madeira cake. I find it, even though it's denser and firmer, it's actually really moist.
Yeah, it doesn't mean
really
you're not
delicious.
making like a dry cake. You're making a good, fluffy, moist cake. It's just got a little bit more structure to it.
Yeah,
so it can
definitely.
handle the weight of that sugar paste. So Sally's just going to continue to build up this cake with her jam and her sponge and her buttercream until we've reached the top. So Sally's using a turntable, which does make this whole thing a lot easier, and you've probably seen me using them before. If you want a bit more detail on how to layer up a layer cake and fill it and crumb coat it and stuff, then click on the link now. So we've got our 4-layer cake here, looking absolutely lovely, but we're not quite ready to crumb coat it yet, because we're going to introduce a little bit of weight now at this point, so that the cake can kind of settle in. So Sally's wrapping it with cling film, and then once it's wrapped, we're going to put some books on it and leave it for, what did you say?
Well, I like to leave it overnight, but 3 hours, that'll do it.
3 hours, and that's just going to slightly compress the cake a little bit so that it's a bit more ready to take the weight of the sugar paste. And once it's cling filmed, you then just need to put books on top, or whatever you have lying around. Could just be your collection of Cupcake Jemma books that you have bought, because you've bought more than one, and just pop that on top and go to the pub. Just kidding, we've got one, we made it earlier.
So, I'm going to take the cling film off, and you'll see that there's some lumps and bumps on the edges of the cake.
So how do we fix those lumps and bumps to make it all nice and thin?
So, it's super simple. Might seem scary, but it's not. Just get a knife. I like a serrated knife, like a bread knife, I suppose. And just really gently, little bit by little bit, you don't want to like hack chunks out of it. I'm just going to shave off.
You're barely going in at all, are you?
No,
Just
not
really
at all. So I'm just finding the side of the cake, keeping it level, and just trimming it down.
So So now that we've got a really nice straight sides and top, we're going to crumb coat this thing. You can use buttercream, it's absolutely fine to do that. At Crumbs Doilies we use white chocolate ganache. It's just got a much better, it dries a lot sort of firmer, which gives us a really nice base for our sugar paste.
Yes.
And also for handling as well.
Yeah, you don't have to use white chocolate ganache, you can use dark chocolate ganache, especially if you're using a chocolate cake, that's probably pretty delicious. But white chocolate, obviously, if you're sugar pasting, you might get like smears, so if you've got like dark chocolate, it might look a bit.
And Sally's going to do 2 layers. So this first layer is just to lock the crumbs in, and we're going to put that in the fridge for about half an hour to an hour just to set, and then give it another coat as well.
Yeah, so the second coat, we want to get it as smooth as we possibly can.
I'm going to try and put a video up next week on how to make white chocolate ganache, so you guys know how to do it. But if you don't know how to do it, then don't worry, you can use buttercream, it's absolutely fine. It's just this edge. So Sally's just going around the edges with a cake scraper, which gives her nice clean edges. Makes a little lip at the top, but you're going to smooth those out, aren't you?
Yes. I'm just going to use the smoother, and I'm going to hold it flat and just pull them into the centre.
You just use a really light touch there, you just kind of brush them back in.
Yeah.
So crumb coat number 1 done. Now it's starting to look really cakey and professional almost. So we're going to put that in the fridge and let that set, and then come back and do the second coat.
Yes.
So here is our cake. It's been in the fridge for about an hour. It is really nice and firm. Play drums on it, which is going to give us a nice base. And so now it's time for the second coating of ganache. And this is going to be a slightly thicker layer, and also the coolness of the cake is going to help it to set, but also it's going to keep it a bit tacky. We're not going to put it in the fridge again because we want it to be a little bit sticky when we should put the sugar paste on, so the sugar paste sticks to it. So Sally's gone in quite thick with this layer. As you can see, she's removing like the excess bits. Again, using her cake scraper, and we are going to be using quite a lot of tools in this that you probably will want to invest in, and I'm going to put a full list of tools in the description box below. And this is the opportunity to also level out any uneven bits, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you've got a slightly slanty top, you just put a little bit more ganache on one side and level it off.
Yeah. So the trick with the cake scraper is to keep it as vertical.
Yeah, at a right angle.
As vertical as possible. If you have it slightly leaning in, you're going to end up with a cake that's leaning in. So if you literally have it on the board, that's a good way to start, a right angle.
And you want this layer to be nice and neat and crisp as well, because the sugar paste, it does hide some things, but you want to give it a really nice neat base to start with, don't you?
Yeah, definitely, because sugar paste is soft, so it will show up your lumps and bumps.
Sally's pretty much finished, so it's going to be time to sugar paste in a minute, but we're just going to clear the decks and give this table a good wipe so that there's no dirt on it that's going to get and muck up our sugar paste. Now it's finally sugar paste time, so Sally's kneading some sugar paste, getting it ready and nice and elasticy so that it's ready to use. And you'll notice that we are both wearing gloves, even though I'm actually probably not going to do any work. You are, I just like wearing them. I like wearing gloves when I'm working with sugar paste because your hands get quite sort of hot, and it means that you get sugar paste stuck to it and you're kind of working moisture into your sugar paste, which you don't want.
The main reason I wear them is so you don't get fingerprints in your sugar paste, because you can see like how soft it is. You just have to touch it, and it makes a mark.
Okay, so wear gloves, top tip.
Top tip.
So we've also got a non-stick board here. If you don't have one, you can do all this on your kitchen counter. Just make sure that you've got lots and lots of room, and it's probably best not to use a kitchen counter if it's like, you know, textured in any way, like tiles or I don't know, lumpy concrete, or they probably wouldn't have that as your kitchen counter. But also, we're going to use some corn flour to stop it from sticking. We do this even on the non-stick board actually, just because it's quite sort of tacky.
Yes.
Stuff. So Sally just rubs a little bit around, and corn flour is much, much better to use than icing sugar, even though icing sugar might seem like an appropriate powder. It's a little bit more grainy, and obviously it's sweet, so it's got a flavour, whereas corn flour is completely flavourless and it's super, super fine, so it's not going to have too much of an impact on the consistency. Yeah. So it's time to start rolling, and one of the most difficult things is to get a nice even shape. Have you got any top tips to avoid an uneven shape?
I do. So start by having a nice even kind of ball in the middle. Now temptation just tells you to roll away.
Rollin', rollin'.
No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forwards and backwards once, and then I'm going to pick my sugar paste up and turn it by 90 degrees, and then I'm going to go forward and backward once, and I'm going to just continue this process until I've got the right thickness. So when the sugar base gets a bit too large to pick up by hand, you can use the rolling pin to aid this, so just flip it over and then lift up the rolling pin and lay it back down.
Because obviously it's really soft sugar paste, so if you try and then pick it up with your hands, the weight of it is going to pull and you're going to damage it.
Okay, so you might not be able to see this, but I've got a little air bubble here. So I'm just going to take a pin, pop it, and just push the air out.
I like to keep a pin handy as well, because obviously you're not in a hermetically sealed room and there might be sort of dust and fluff floating around, and a pin's really useful to just very carefully pick those bits out. And another thing I would say is that when you're working with sugar paste like this, don't let your cat in the room and don't wear any fluffy mohair cardigans, because you're going to get fluff all in your sugar paste. And the thickness of your sugar paste, is there an optimum thickness for rolling it out?
I like to go for between 3 and 5 millimetres. If you really like the taste of sugar paste, then put loads on. And the thinner it is, the harder it's going to be, because it's going to be thinner, you're going to put it on the cake and it's going to start to drag and make cracks.
Yeah, and with it thicker you can kind of smooth it out a little bit more, can't you?
Absolutely. So to check the thickness, I'm just going to slice a bit off the edge. So we can see the thickness here. I'm going to go for a little bit thinner.
Okay.
So I'm just going to do a tiny bit more rolling.
Okay.
And then we'll be ready.
So it's the right thickness now, what's next?
So now we're going to put it on the cake. But before we do that, we're just going to make sure we've got enough sugar paste, because that would be quite tragic
if we didn't have enough.
So I'm going to use my rolling pin to aid me a little bit, just kind of get a measurement. And I can check. So this is in fact more than enough, which is great.
But we don't want to have all of it, do we? 'Cause
No.
of that weight.
Yeah, so the weight of it is going to pull down, and as it goes over the edges, it can very easily crack. So I want to get almost a spot on amount. So I'm just going to trim my excess off. Get rid of that.
Now, this next bit is the bit that fills most people with fear. It's putting the sugar paste on the cake. It's quite tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky.
But it's not impossible, and it's
not
just a
impossible.
few handy hints which we're about
Yeah,
to give you.
definitely.
You can definitely do
And
it.
if it goes wrong, you just take it off,
Yeah.
smooth out your cake and do it again.
Done that many times, haven't we?
Done
Back
that
in the old
many
days.
times.
Taking it off, putting it
Yeah.
back on again, take it off.
So, I'm going to use the rolling pin to lift it up, because obviously it's pretty thin and big, and I'm just going to rip it with my fingers, so like I did when I was rolling it. And when I put it on, I'm going to go from my back, your front, to my front. Because if I go from front to back, I can't really see what I'm doing at the back, and I might lean into the cake and hit it. And if I do it from back to front, I can see what's going on.
Right, that's a top tip. Once it's over the top, it looks a little bit like a tablecloth, and she's very gently picking up the bottom of the skirt and just very, very carefully just smoothing it out bit by bit, and that'll help avoid getting any pleats and folds. Now that all the sugar paste is in place, you've stopped using your hands, haven't you? And you're using this cake smoother.
Yeah, I'm going to use the cake smoother instead of my hands, because it's flat. If you use your hand, you think you're going to be smoothing it on, but you'll find you'll have indentations, because obviously your hand isn't completely smooth.
So this is just called a cake smoother. You can pick these up at cake decorating shops or online. It's essentially just a bit of plastic with a handle, but it's nice and straight. And what are you doing now?
So now I'm just sealing the cake. So I'm using this nice sharp corner, and I'm going to keep my smoother right up against my cake, and I'm just going to gently push it in. So that's going to seal off the cake, so it's all nicely tight inside its little sugar paste case.
And also, it's going to make it a lot easier to trim this useless skirt off, isn't
Yeah,
it?
definitely, because you can actually see that I've hit the board now, so I can take my palette knife, mini palette knife.
You can just use a small knife if you don't have a mini palette knife.
And I'm going to gently slice it off.
You're going quite close to the edge, aren't you? So
Yeah,
it's nice and
absolutely.
straight, in line with the cake
Yeah.
itself.
Once it's off, so now I'm just going to take my smoother, and I'm just going to smooth it all out.
Get rid of any bits and
Get
bobs.
rid of that. Get off. So whilst I'm smoothing, because we used ganache as the crumb coat, I can actually apply quite a lot of pressure without affecting the cake inside.
And as you go along, you might notice some air bubbles. It's perfectly normal and perfectly, fixable with a trusty pin. So Sally pokes it right through to the cake, and then you kind of work it out with your fingers, don't you?
Yeah.
And if you want to be really, really cool, after when you finish the cake, you can actually make up a little bit of royal icing in exactly the same colour and fill those holes, can't you? A bit like polyfiller, and then smooth them out. It's quite a neat trick too. So that is pretty much a sugar pasted cake. Well, it clearly is, but it can actually be better, believe it or not, even though this is already awesome. If you want to know how to do really, really crisp, square, neat and tidy edges, Sally's going to show you how to do it.
So I'm going to use 2 cake smoothers. This one's got a right angle on it, which is great because we can make sure the edges stay nice and vertical and flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one on the side and this one on the top. And I'm going to go around the cake and I'm going to gently, very gently, pull across with the top one and upwards with the side one.
So you're kind of pinching those
I
corners
am.
together.
So I'm going to go all the way around and you can see how it's already coming together.
So once you've gone around the whole cake, pinching it together with your cake smoothers, you'll find you have a little lip that goes all the way around the corners.
So now I'm going to take my smoother and I'm just going to take it around the edge, and that's going to force the little lip that we made to stand proud. So now that the lip is upwards, I'm going to take my scalpel, which is super sharp, and I'm going to keep it level with the top of the cake, and I'm going to very gently slice that lip.
So once Sally's shaved a little bit off, she goes over it again with her finger just to make sure that there's no weird unnatural scalpel marks on it. And as you can see, it creates this really super, super sharp corner, which is going to impress all your friends. It's impressed me. So that is a pretty good looking cake, I think you'll agree. Well done, Sally. But it can actually get better, believe it or not, because this cake looks amazing, but the board is it's kind of letting the side down a little bit because it's silver, it's a bit chintzy. Bit shabby. So we're going to cover it, right? Well, you're going to cover it. I'm just going to keep wearing my gloves and pretending I'm doing work. So how do we do that?
So super easy. Just going to roll out a piece of sugar paste that's the same size as the board.
I'm going to get rid of this.
What some people do is they would sugar paste a completely new board and put their cake onto it, but we want to touch this cake as little as possible, like we've already discussed. So I'll show you a super easy trick for not having to move your cake. So we'll roll this out. So this is plenty big enough. You can just pick your cake board up and see. I'm going to trim it down. I want it a little bit bigger just to give us a bit of safety net. So now I'm going to cut out a circle about the same size as the cake.
Okay.
From the centre.
Does it need to be exactly the right size and shape, or?
No, just vague.
So
the main thing is that the bit you've got left is going to be wide enough to cover your board.
Right.
So I'm just going to fish that out.
You do want to make it kind of neat though, don't you?
Yes, because this is going to go...
You're not going to make a square.
No, what we're going to do is slice it at the back, like this. Pick these up, fold them forwards.
That might have looked really scary to you, but trust me, it's absolutely fine.
Be brave. Pick your cake up, and now very gently lift the paste and just place it onto the edge of the board and unfold.
You're not putting it right up to the edge of the cake now?
No, not yet, because I want to make it as neat as possible. So I'm going to lift it up with my hands and edge it towards.
You're kind of teasing it on.
Teasing it on bit by bit.
And you're not using any sticky stuff. Is it going to stick to the board?
Yeah, it's going to stick because sugar paste has a certain amount of stickiness to it. If you put some glue on the board, you wouldn't be able to move it around as easily as we are now.
So now she's got it all around the edge, and now is the magic bit, isn't it? This is a real trick.
This is the best tip of the day. I'm going to overlap the 2 bits of sugar paste, cut through both of them, discard one piece, and discard the other,
Aha!
Ta-da!
And that way you get a completely even seam.
If you've got a little join like this, or if you have any cracks in your cake, you can, if you've got a glove on, it makes it much easier. Just gently smooth it away, very lightly, so you don't make too much of an indentation. We just need to cut off the excess with our nice, super sharp knife. Just go right into the edge of the board, keeping it vertical, and slice it off. I like to do it bit by bit.
So why do you do it bit by bit? Just so you don't have to deal with a really long ribbon?
Yeah, just so you don't end up dragging anything, breaking it off. Little bit by little bit. So that's all trimmed.
Looks amazing, but we can make it even better, believe it or not, by putting some ribbon on it.
Yes.
So this is just going to cover up that join between the sugar paste and the silvery, shiny cake board. And you want to choose a ribbon that's obviously as thick as that whole thing. You don't want something that's going to come proud of the edge there. And just use a pin to secure it. So that is it. It's finished and it looks amazing. It's a perfectly iced, very, very neat and tidy, professional looking cake. Made by a professional, Valley Della. And I didn't help at all. I think I just stood here with my gloves on. I'm sorry. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope you've picked up tons of tips that are going to help you make your own very professional looking sugar pasted cake.
And don't worry if it doesn't go right first time. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, you've made quite a lot of them.
I have made a lot of cakes. They definitely didn't look like this the first time I did it.
No, they didn't. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, you can do that by clicking the link at the end. There's also a link on screen now if you want to check out more behind the scenes action from Crumbs and Doilies and the team and all the things that they get up to. I'll be back next week with another recipe for you guys. So until then, happy sugar pasting.
Good luck.
Bye.